This is the man behind the horrors of Golders Green as he pursued Jewish targets. Today, the man behind the mass attack has been named as Essa Suleiman, a Somali-born British national. Before his arrest, the 45-year-old attacker was known to police. We now know he had been referred to the anti-extremism program Prevent. The police had said that Suleiman has a history of mental illness, and acquaintances who know him described him as erratic. They said Suleiman was isolated after his divorce, and even they did not feel safe around him. And they claimed Suleiman was long known for violent outbreaks, even against old friends, and had been in and out of psychiatric care. Channel 4 News can now reveal that the attacker had only left the Maudsley Psychiatric Hospital just days before the attack. But if there are questions for mental health services, a backdrop of anti-Semitic attacks has demanded answers from police and politicians first. This was the Prime Minister arriving in Golders Green to fear and loathing on his suspended campaign trail. Some here called the Prime Minister a traitor who had let Jews down, following a series of incidents that may vary in origin, with some the suspected work of organised foreign proxies and others led by lone wolves, but all with the same end result. Today the national threat level rose from substantial to severe. Inside, Keir Starmer is meeting with representatives of Hezbollah, and despite pledging more resources for policing and introducing new laws with Iranian proxies in mind, those gathered here are angry, and they say all of that is still not enough.
We want to live an ordinary life, that we're not asking for the world. We're asking to be able to go walk in the street with a kippah on a man's head and then not be stabbed in the street. We're asking for basic needs to be met.
The huge wave of anti-Semitism, the government is failing in enforcing the laws of the UK to keep us safe.
A call I heard again and again was for the government to curtail the Palestine solidarity marches, accused of fostering an anti-Semitism that led to Wednesday's attack.
If you stand alongside people who say globalise the intifada, you are calling for terrorism against Jews. And people who use that phrase should be prosecuted.
But campaigners say these protests to end Israeli military strikes in Gaza have been misrepresented and wrongly linked to an act of violence. Is there a danger of conflating the acts of somebody who is unwell with terrorism?
I need to be very careful what I say, because counter-terrorism police are conducting a live investigation, and what we want to make sure happens above all else is that the perpetrator is held to account for his actions.
Essa Suleiman's attack has raised the fear factor, just as politicians enter the fray in the run-up to the local elections. Jewish life has found itself under siege, in attacks made complex by foreign actors claiming responsibility and lone individuals with a history of mental illness. The question now for authorities is, how does Britain keep Jewish people safe?
Well, as you heard there, the national terror threat level has been raised to severe after yesterday's attack, and protesters from the campaign against anti-Semitism have begun gathering outside Downing Street for what they call a national emergency rally. Our senior political correspondent Paul McNamara is there. Paul, what's going on?
Yeah, there's about 300 people here now. Their charge to the Prime Minister is that 6 months ago there was a fatal attack at a synagogue in Manchester. Action was promised, and yet more attacks on Jews, more lives at risk. As if to underline that point, in the last hour or so, the threat level has been raised from substantial to severe. What that means is that an attack is, quote, highly likely in the next 6 months. The Joint Terrorism Analysis Centre say, yes, it is in light of yesterday's attack in Golders Green, but it's not solely down to that. They say that actually the threat level has been rising for some time, driven jointly by an increased Islamist threat, but also an extreme right-wing threat. Politically, campaigning from all the major parties ahead of next week's local elections have been paused, but specifically for Labour, talking to senior sources today, they say this Keir Starmer being heckled in Golders Green today, that particularly stings for him, given the accusations of anti-Semitism under the Jeremy Corbyn leadership and the years that Keir Starmer and Labour have spent trying to rehabilitate their relationship with the Jewish community.
Paul in Westminster, thank you very much indeed. Well, in another development tonight, Britain's most senior police officer, Mark Rowley, has accused Green Party leader Zach Polanski of creating a chilling effect after he shared a post that was critical of the officers who arrested the Golders Green attacker. In a letter, the Met Commissioner, who attended the scene yesterday, said that he was disappointed by Mr. Polanski and that the post was inaccurate and misinformed. The post had accused officers of repeatedly and violently kicking a mentally ill man in the head when he was already incapacitated. Kieran.
Thanks, Matt. Well, the attack in Golders Green was just the latest in a wave of anti-Semitic attacks. At least 4 attempted arson attacks against Jewish targets were recorded this year in North London alone. And last year, 2 men died after an attack on a synagogue in Manchester, of course. It has led to some saying it is no longer safe to be Jewish in the UK. And as we speak, around 100 firefighters are responding tonight to a fire at a property next door to a synagogue in North London, though the cause is still unknown. Our communities editor, Darshana Soni, has been to Manchester to speak to British Jews about how they're changing their lives and what needs to be done to keep them safe.
The bakery is bustling ahead of tomorrow's Shabbat. But the sunny afternoon is overshadowed by news of the terror attack in Golders Green.
Whoever we speak to, they just can't believe what's going on. It's people being radicalised. Why are they hating when we're in a lovely country where we're all happy together? What is going on?
It's a question Tina and Lawrence Abramson have been asking a lot lately. They describe themselves as proud British Jews, married 62 years.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Congratulations.
Last year, on the holiest day in the Jewish calendar, Mr. Abramson was on his way to the Heaton Park Synagogue when it was targeted in a murderous assault.
Oh, are you okay?
Yeah.
2 people were killed, as well as the attacker.
He saw dead bodies outside the synagogue on Yom Kippur last year. That was horrendous.
Outside the bakery, on patrol, private guards employed by the Community Security Trust. Now a fact of life here. They visit shops, synagogues and even schools.
In the last few years, it's tended to be very difficult. We're really afraid for our safety.
Ben Katzov is a local businessman who's established 4 restaurants since moving here.
My family came from Prestwich to Israel 60 years ago, and I did the other way around, so I came back.
But he says he had to take down a sign advertising one business as kosher because it made it a target.
I had a lot of threats to my shop. People actually called them, and I had the bomb threats, and I had to my own mobile.
When the government says they're going to increase security and put more money into protecting Jewish places of worship, for example, you feel that won't help?
It's very nice words, but it needs actions.
What actions? What would make you feel safer?
Punishment to the people that are going in the wrong way.
Mr. Katzov worries that some British Jews are starting to question their future here. But others I meet are determined to stay in the neighbourhoods and communities they've helped build over the generations.
So I'm 5 generations British. I'm incredibly proud to be British, and our Jewish and British identity sit alongside one another in perfect harmony.
You grew up around here, didn't you?
And I grew up 500 yards from where we sat, right in the heart of the Manchester Jewish community. So we've got butchers, we've got a deli, we've got a shoe shop, we've got a florist and a hardware store. It's somewhere that hasn't really changed in all the generations that we've lived here.
But Mark Levy says he's heartbroken that sense of security has changed for the next generation.
My children will not have an easy life compared to what I had as British Jews.
And how does that make you feel when you think about your kids?
Well, it's devastating because I've had such an idyllic childhood. Growing up, I never had to experience anti-Semitism on the streets of the UK. What we need from those outside of our community now is some solidarity and support, because it's felt very lonely as we've sought to combat this hatred against our community for no reason.
And it's that solidarity that they're calling for here, something that no amount of new money or new initiatives will be able to fix.
Well, joining me now is Rabbi Charlie Baginski, the co-lead of the Movement for Progressive Judaism. Thank you very much for coming on the line. How safe or unsafe do you feel on your own streets these days?
I think that the Jewish community, wherever they are in the country at the moment, is not feeling safety in the way that a few months ago we might have felt. It's feeling closer and closer to home, and that's a scary feeling.
And do you think this is a novel feeling for the Jewish community in this country, or were there instances like this, I don't know, perhaps before you were born?
I don't think it's a novel feeling for the Jewish community. The fact is every time we walk into one of our synagogues to pray, or into a Jewish community centre, or even for an event, we have security. It's the reality of Jewish life in the UK for as long as I've been alive, and before. What's different is the amount of security and the feeling that actually no security at the moment is adequate to keep us feeling secure and safe.
Which is a very sad thing to say. So do you think it was right for the Prime Minister to get heckled today by members of your community when he visited the site of the attack in North London?
I think that emotions are very high at the moment, and it's understandable that the leader of this country would be the one that would receive much of that emotion. And I think while many of the people in the community are very grateful for the work and effort that he's put into rooting anti-Semitism out of the Labour Party, that there is a real feeling at the moment that more needs to be done to make the Jewish community in the UK feel safe. I really appreciated his comments about language around globalise the Intifada today, but I think many of us would have appreciated those comments on that language coming much earlier.
Because there are many people, on the other side of the political spectrum who think that he's not been nearly critical enough of Israel in the war on Gaza. He's not been nearly pro-Palestinian enough, and is being punished for it at the polls.
Look, I think that you're asking me to step into a different issue, which is about the political situation in Israel and Gaza. And I think what I'm here to do is to talk about that impact on anti-Semitism in the UK. And I certainly think that he hasn't been tough enough, or the government hasn't been tough enough, on tackling the impact of some of that language. When we talk about globalise the Intifada, we're actually seeing that impacted on our communities in reality right now.
Sure. I mean, there are Jews that I've spoken to, British Jews, who are contemplating moving their families to Israel at the moment, even though Israel is also in the middle of a war. I mean, that strikes me as quite a drastic decision under these current circumstances for people who'd never thought of doing that before.
I think that for many of us, the UK is our home. We have had many opportunities through our lives to see Jewish life thrive. But we're also built into our bones is Jewish history, and Jewish history informs how we feel in moments. And many Jews throughout history have always talked about needing more than one passport, more than one route out of the country, because they felt under threat. And so that is what we're seeing is those motions resurfacing now as people, as the Jewish community, wanting options to feel safe in their daily lives.
And what do you think the government can do to make you feel safer? I mean, you said before that there's no amount of security that will make you feel safer. But for instance, should they go as far as banning pro-Palestinian marches on the streets of London or elsewhere?
I'm a proponent of free speech and the right to demonstrate, but I think that there is a difference between a pro-Palestinian march walking through the streets of London and a pro-Palestinian march that starts at the start of a synagogue service outside a synagogue. We see that crossover between something being the right to protest into something that can impact on the Jewish community as making them feel unsafe. And that's the bit that really needs to be tackled.
And finally and briefly, do you think the actions of the Israeli Prime Minister, especially in the war on Gaza, have made British Jews like you feel less safe on your own streets?
I think we have to be really careful not to mix up two issues. Jews have a right, regardless of what is happening in Israel and the rights or wrongs of the Israeli government, to feel safe here and not to be impacted by global events, in the same way that all faiths do, that they have the right to be British and not to be impacted by any other global government.
Rabbi Charlie Baginski, I appreciate your time. Thank you very much indeed.